Well, I'm a scientist. I was trained by a chemist, and I worked in R&D for over 2 decades, working mostly. Is that too far?
Yeah.
Okay, so. Okay, so I worked in R&D. Does this work? I worked in R&D for 2 decades, mostly in anti-infectives, and the path I took was probably a little easier than yours because I started my company in the US where it's easier to raise money, and it's an anti-infective company, which is not the first but second category, so it must have been easier. I don't have a track record of running companies. This is my first role as a CEO of a biotech, but I do have a long and painful experience of conducting R&D, starting from really early discovery programs, taking the basic science, which I know many of you are doing here, and translating that into drugs. Actually, one drug so far, which I'm a co-inventor on for a drug for HIV/AIDS, which I discovered when I was working for a big multinational pharma. Does this not work?
If you put it closer, it works.
I always want to be a rock star. I can.
I'm not going to go there.
I don't look it? Thank you, Otello. So as I was saying, have seen the translation of science into pharmaceutical discovery, and now trying to do that again in a different context. In a small company, we raised our Series A last year, and our Series B this year. Our Series B was sizable. We've raised 73 million so far, and we hope that will get us through clinical proof of concept with a couple of antibody programs that we discovered as part of pharma we issued from.
But you left Greece when you were 15, if I remember
I left Greece when I was 15, yes. I did most of my studies outside Greece. But I know the country, obviously. I grew up not far from here, maybe 20 minutes down the road. And I know the quality of science that we perform in Greece today. I have frequently sought collaborations. Very often it's difficult, but I think the comments on the ecosystem that you made, Ari, echo with me. I think the ecosystem in biomedical research is really important. So you need the academic research, you need the funding, you need the companies, the people. But really, there is one that starts everything, and that's the academic research. And having a vibrant, well-funded academic research community that is successful and produces ideas and concepts is really the starting point. The tough thing with biomedical research is it takes time. One of my stints in pharma was in Singapore. Singapore invested about a decade ago in biomedical research, and 5 years in, they have central planning. It's one of those interesting countries, but they got together and they said, where's the return? Well, we all know 5 years, you're just starting. So I think the important thing is to stay the course and to keep generating good ideas, conducting good science, good research, and driving towards relevant areas. And I believe that the money, the private investment, and the biotechs will follow, but it takes time.
So, if I remember correctly, you went to Belgium, right? And you did all your studies there?
Are you on the whole story?
Yeah,
it's
come on,
very, very
give people
long
the
story.
story.
Yes, I studied in Belgium. I studied biochemistry in Belgium and France. I did my PhD in France and Germany. I did a first stint in the US as a postdoc at Yale, and then came back to Europe to work for a big multinational pharmaceutical company. I started as a staff scientist, which is when I started. I worked on that molecule, which later became a drug. So this is almost 2 decades ago now.
Was it hard for you the transition from being an academic scientist into a pharma? Did you feel that research was done differently, or was it?
Well, the interesting thing is every scientist is an academic scientist initially, right? We all train in academia, and for those of us who did a PhD or master's degree, we all trained in academic research and scientific thinking. And really, this is not that different from doing the same thing in big pharma. The big difference that I found was actually, strangely, not the applied side of things, because when you write grants, you always need to find the application, right? I don't think anyone gets money today unless there is an application, potential application paragraph at the end of a grant. I think the interesting thing was, the most challenging thing was to start working in teams. And this is one that most people don't realize looking in from the outside. To drive the drug discovery program, one scientist or even a small group of scientists is not enough. I transitioned from being a postdoc, working at the bench by myself and trying to protect my ideas as much as possible so that I get the authorship as first on the paper, to moving to working in teams of 15 or 20 with chemists, biologists, EPK experts, working across the field.
So, two questions. One is, when you moved from the US into Europe, did you see differences? Or when you moved from Europe to the US, did you feel there's a different approach, a different mentality? Would you?
I think when it comes to applied research, when it comes to pharma, to biotech, there definitely is a greater appetite for risk investment, more investment, larger teams, bigger rounds of funding, and that's visible obviously in your slides when you see the biotech rounds. It's also visible when you work in a pharmaceutical company, the size of teams, the horizon of the projects, and I think to a degree that's responsible for what I believe is today dominance of the US. It's not a bad thing, but it shows us what needs to be done to be successful, I think. And that's to take the risk and invest for the longer term.
From a mentality perspective, do you feel that having experience both in Europe and the US helped you, or do you think that it doesn't matter, you're a scientist, doesn't matter where you are?
Well, that's an interesting question. I guess if you're in Europe, you learn to do things relatively inexpensively and to look for money a lot more than when you're in the US. It must be much harder for an American scientist to succeed in Europe than the converse. And I can think of many examples where European scientists and entrepreneurs have moved to the US to be very successful. I can think of fewer going in the other direction. That might be why.
I mean, now you're in probably what is the top biotech ecosystem in the world, Boston, right? I mean, I think that's, by now, everybody has accepted that San Francisco is number 2. How is it? I mean, explain, give us a little bit of a feel. One thing that we read a lot, I mean, I don't know if people know what Kendall Square is. I mean, that's literally a square in the vicinity of MIT, where in biotech has become very important simply because most of biotech companies are based around it, right? And literally, you have cafes where you just go sit down and they get swarmed by people that work in our industry. And I can tell you that one of the beginnings of one deal I had was actually in a cafe in Kendall Square. And I know a lot of people that have that experience. So could you give us a little bit, kind of transport us there, tell us how it is right now, and how is the biotech?
I think it's as close as it gets to the ideal ecosystem that we were discussing earlier. You have great universities, great schools, which means great students, by the way, great PhD students, great postdocs, and investigators. And then in that same space, you have investors, some really good investors who have the appetite for risk and look for those new ideas, seek those new ideas out. And you have companies. who worked on those ideas. And it's all within, as you said, within that walking distance, 4 blocks. So when we started Entasis, that's the name of the company that I worked for a year ago, starting with very little money and maybe a year and a half of runway, we thought it'd be really hard to get started. And actually it was not all that hard. Once we had the funding, it was very easy to find people, well-trained scientists with a lot of experience in academia and biotech. And you, as you said, you just walk down the cafe and strike up a conversation, and you come up with a new idea and a new way to solve the problem that you're facing.
If you were to set up a company in Europe, is there an area where you would say, yes, it's similar to Kendall Square, or if you had a choice, where would you go?
Yeah, with my 13-month experience of leading a biotech, this is not something I have given a lot of thought. But I would say, and again, your presentation was illustrating that the UK is a place where you find the same dynamic very often, mostly around Cambridge and Oxford. Again, no accident, I think, that these are two major university centers there. And also I think might be lacking a little bit more in Cambridge and Oxford are the investors. Now, investors you should know that, investors like to invest in companies that they can walk to. Actually, it makes a difference. You must be experiencing that working in Europe.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we don't. I'm in Geneva right now. I've worked in Zurich. I've worked in Munich. There's definitely that. Absolutely. There is no, in my view, there is no comparison of any European ecosystem to the American ecosystem. And I also think that's an opportunity, right? Because you cannot see everything in a negative way. You have to see it also in a positive way. So when you don't have something, you have the opportunity to create something. For example, I think there's going to be a lot of people who will disagree with this, but I think that's also an opportunity for Greece. Because what you have in Greece, you have the production of a lot of very, very good scientists that are very, very solid with their science. But then again, you don't have a lot of other elements of the ecosystem that maybe this is easier to create than a very highly skilled workforce. One of the things I find extremely interesting about your company is, we always talk about, or most people talk about this kind of thing, there's a discovery in a research center or university, a molecule or a platform technology, and then you go through all the risk of doing your preclinical studies, and then you're like, okay, I made it, and now you do your IND, and you made it, and you do your phase 1, your phase 2, and you kind of go along and you're waiting for the deal. Your story is a little bit different than this, right? And I think that's an interesting trend, because I think we can definitely talk about a trend now of, what is that trend of pharma spin-offs. So believe it or not, even pharma has an issue with funding. You hear about amazing numbers in the numbers they spend in their budgets, but at the end of the day, even they have to make choices. And I think AstraZeneca, if I remember correctly, had to make a choice, made a choice, and probably to your good luck, right?
Well, we shall see. I certainly hope so. But you're right, it is a trend. When I started working in pharma 20-something years ago, every company was working in every therapeutic area with very sizable investments, and today that's not possible. Research development become more and more expensive. Studies are longer and more extensive. Big companies have to make choices, as you just said. Interestingly, Big Pharma seems to be making very consistent choices, so most companies seem to focus on the same areas. The area that I work in, which is anti-infectives, is one that has largely been disinvested by Big Pharma. That creates a challenge, by the way, because as we were discussing earlier, one of the ways in which investors see their return is merger and acquisition, and for that there needs to be an acquirer. So I would certainly hope that the medical need is going to drive the reinvestment from Big Pharma into this area. I think it also allows us to test a different way of doing R&D in Big Pharma. you have relatively large groups working over a long period of time. In biotech, you have at best a runway of 3 or 4 years, and certainly not a big group to work with. So we'll see how that experiment works out. I certainly hope it will work out for us.
Just a little bit more information on that. Basically, what happened, I think, what Manos did, and maybe you want to say a couple of words on that, is there were a couple of molecules, or at least one main molecule, right, that was already in clinical development, so that decided not to pursue a delivery area, right? And that was the opportunity that you saw in creating a company.
That's right. It wasn't so much an opportunity that I saw as much as the opportunity that was put before me. I must say, I don't consider myself as an entrepreneur. I'm a scientist, but I saw actually more than a program. It was one that's in the clinic. We just completed phase 2 clinical trials actually on that one, but a pipeline that I had worked with my colleagues, collaborators to create over the last 5 years, and none of that was going to be funded going forward. It was a choice to just let it wither and never see a drug coming out of that, or to take the risk and then go to bad VCs and look for money. We found good VCs actually who helped us shape the proposal. Having no experience of working in biotech, the first business plan was not exactly a biotech business plan. It took us a couple of years actually to put the business plan together that would satisfy both the investors and AstraZeneca. Well, hopefully it's the right plan.
So I think, the reason it's important and interesting, let's say from the audience perspective of people that are starting to think of starting a company, is that you have more things to compete with. You don't have only, I think there's an echo. You don't only have the part that you need to convince the VC that what you have is better than the other guy. You also have to compete about the fact that maybe suddenly there's going to be a pharma, there's going to be discontinued programs in an area, there's going to be a launch of a company, and you have to kind of have data that are better than this. And this is an important point, I believe, because one of the issues that we're facing in biotechnology is that we cut corners. Why do we cut corners? Because we, trying to conserve cash, because this may come as a surprise to you, but most biotechs have under 2 years of cash. I mean, I don't think I've ever worked with a biotech that had more than 2 years of cash. So, can you give us a little bit, when you guys were doing this in AstraZeneca, when you were creating, let's say, the preclinical package, was that important when you tried to raise money? When, did people see the preclinical package and say, wow, this is well done, pharma grade, I can sign off on this? Was that an important element?
Yes, obviously it was, and that's where actually it's a blessing and a curse, because yes, you have that high quality package and the depth of data when you spin out, but you need to get used to working in a different way and to be able to deliver the same quality with much less funding. Maybe not quite 2 years of runway. Actually, I think in the US, many companies now have more than that in recent years. Particularly if you look at technology platforms, they raise very sizable Series A, Series B, and end up with more money than a couple of years. But you still have to conserve it. You still have to spend it wisely. And you certainly can't reproduce big pharma quality packages for the number of molecules that you would want to if you were in big pharma.
The reason I asked that question to Manos is, in my experience, when I have seen molecules from Greece, especially molecules that are closer to the clinic, usually their preclinical package is not pharma grade. And I can tell you also from my experience that it doesn't matter if you're trying to raise money or if you're trying to license that molecule to a pharmaceutical company, everybody's going to look at the quality of the work you've done at the preclinical level in phase 1. And if that work is not of quality, you're going to have an issue on multiple levels, right?
But it's also a stage question, right? Because many of those packages require $1 million, $2 million plus sometimes, and to raise that million, you need some data before that. I think you can, depending on the amount that looking to raise, you can actually have a package that is not quite pharma, but shows enough quality there to allow you to raise the money that will complete the preclinical package, for instance.
Yeah, but Mano, I agree with you, but in order for me as a CEO to sign off on something like this, I need to know that the guy that designed it knows what he's doing and has done it probably around 30 to 40 times before, in order for me to even think about taking the risk of not doing it at the highest possible level, right? Because I know that this can destroy the company. It can destroy the molecule, it can destroy the company. And you know, sometimes there's also an ethical element to it, right? Because you know that you have something in your hands that could help patients. And if you make a major mistake, these patients will not see ever that molecule. And that sucks. You know, it's really not a good situation to be in. Right?
But I think there are enough people, enough scientists who worked in big pharma who've seen what those packages need to look like. Many of them through the cycle of contraction that big pharma has been experiencing the last decade, actually working as consultants. That might be one solution for getting those insights, right?
I agree, but here I would have to say again that that's another difference between the United States and Europe. It's much easier to find those people in the United States than it is to find them in Europe. In Europe, we have about 10, 15 people that pretty much everybody uses. That's not the right way to do it, right? And definitely the pool of talent that is available to you in the United States is much, much larger and much more experienced, right? How much more time do we have? Just a time check? 0, I'm told. Okay. So Otello decided that it's 0. Otello is one of the largest VC investors, and he came in all the way from Boston, so I have to take his clue for it. I mean, I don't want to piss off an investor. Mano, thank you very, very much for coming. Thanks the audience for attending, and I'll pass it on to Aris for the next stage.
Thank you.